their boundary, and the
Yes,
sea is at the heart of the thing. So it's as
absolutely.
if we are replicating what the sea does with the river.
Yeah, I think generally this is the notion. I'm going to just comment on your second question first and go. Any body of water, the classic amphibian history, which is not called that, was actually Fernand Brauddel's work on the Mediterranean, where he talked about this. I just gave a paper at a conference using Braudel, but in a different way. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about the fact that the water has always been either salt water or fresh water has been part and parcel of our inheritance. I mean, I'm gonna just give you one image that is so powerful in my mind. The Malo fishermen of the Delta. I mean, the Chunori, Nikiri, Malo. Malo fishermen, they're ancestral myths. How did the ancestors appear? Now, could have been from another island. Naked, as dark as a stone, with hair like snake, with kancha in hand. Kancha is that three-pronged spear with which. Now, that's not a deep sea fishing implement. Kancha is polo, kancha. This is shallow water, right? Shallow water, mud flat, that entire area, and which will soon become that with the rising of the oceans, right? There are so many Bengali words that are hard to translate. Bada. Bada is not marsh. It's very difficult to translate. Habod, from which Howdah comes. We are amphibian people. Especially if you grew up in the 70s and had to wade to school. Definitely amphibian. But that's the point. And then, this idea of the Anthropocene, of course, sin and pollution. If you take a look at my book, I try to just encapsulate that idea in the last epilogue called The Two Bodies of the River. Like everything, there's a duality. One which is the mortal, vulnerable, and that's the other, the eternal. I have seen so many times, right, and been Benares and other places, floating carcasses, and somebody's doing torpon, gently pushing aside the floating carcass and doing torpon to your ancestors. That person is not dipping his or her body into this river. That person is dipping his or her body into the river as it should be, as it was. Doesn't matter. Death is inevitable. Who cares? I mean, depending on your attitude. So that's something. But then the question is that who's going to clean the river, and how? Who will stop the flow of arsenic? Who will stop the endless assault of tube wells across the UP? Who will stop the most engineering place in the planet, which is UP? No, we are sitting on the precipice of destruction. I said it. I say in my book, the Huanghe stopped close to 300 miles from its source. The great, terrible river of China, the Yellow River, stopped. Can you imagine Ganga stopping 200 miles from its source? Then what will we say then? Where are we going to go and take our dip? What's going to happen to... I'm not saying it's going to happen, but think about it. Vanishing glaciers, depletion of the ice packs. Look at the Himalayas. They're getting stonier by the day. Siltation, and of course industrial and organic pollution. I'm very depressed. I hope the next generation will take this up in earnest. And I said that it doesn't matter what your ideology is. You can have many ideologies. If you love, I'm going to sound very sentimental and silly. If you love your river, you should save it. Doesn't matter how and for what purpose. Let it flow. Let it flow. And e-flows, right? This is the buzzword. But I really think that environmental flows are important, and we should recognize it. If we can do in one part of the river, maybe it'll... And it cannot be done from above. It has to involve people from below. And it has to be a democratic, if I may use that word, process. And not the preserve of one particular ideology or one particular state.
It was a wonderful illuminating presentation from you.
Thank you.
Legend has it that Bhagirath brought the Ganges down by a tapasya,
Of
arduous
course.
tapasya of course, from following your work, I think that you also have done a mini tapasya in giving us this work. Now, coming to the issues
Sure.
involved, first, what do you think that Ganges or Ganga and Yamuna, they are adored in India as a mother. They are worshipped as mother. Brahmaputra and Indus, on the contrary, they are not given the status of divinity.
First of all, Brahmaputra is a father.
Father, yeah. And Indus is also considered masculine. They're the brothers of Ganga and Yamuna. Their status comes from they being the brothers of Ganga and Yamuna. So Ganga and Yamuna in India is, worshipped as the mother. Mother. So that gives them that kind of, a divinity, which others rivers don't enjoy. Even Tagore in his national anthem has not mentioned the Indus and Brahmaputra. He says Ganga Yamuna in his Janagana Mana. Ganga Yamuna is mentioned, but Brahmaputra and Indus is not mentioned. So Savarkar got it wrong. Savarkar's perception doesn't go with the general perception. Savarkar called India Pitrabhumi, which is not the general perception in India as a Matribhumi. So Savarkar's perception is contrary to the general perception of what the country, the masses of our country believe. Now, another thing was, which, in South, people say that Bhagirath brought the Ganges down to earth. Gautam Rishi by his tapasya took the Ganges down to the south, and it's called Godavari.
Yeah.
But I like to have your, comment on this part. And another part which I'd like to ask is the Uttarakhand, the 2013 disaster at Uttarakhand. Since you mentioned about the future, Swami Nigabananda was one saint who had given up his life in 2012. He said if action is not taken, this, a great disaster is going to, befall Uttarakhand. And that's exactly what happened in 2013. What do you think of this? Another thing is this: since you have given us pictures of the Ganges, they say that the ecology of the Himalayas down up there is quite fragile. It does not allow thousands of people. After the state of Uttarakhand was formed, to encourage tourism, thousands of people went up the hills, and that they say created the disaster of 2013. So, one professor of IIT Kanpur, retired professor, he gave up his life recently
Yes.
for the protection of the Ganges. So I'd like to know you, since you have done some very good, deeply researched study, what do you think of the future of the Uttarakhand disaster and how these disasters can be prevented? And I was in Uttarakhand, people there from the hills, they said that the Tehri Dam, the idea of, damming the river for irrigation and for electricity is a disaster in the long run. In the short run, it's okay. But in the long run, it's a disaster. So the entire planning idea of India from 92 onwards is a disaster. Building these large dams and all that.
Yes.
This is what I got from the people who live there, right in the hills. Through my interaction with them, they told me about this. I'd like to know your comments on all this.
Well, you have asked, I was trying to count, about 8 or 9 questions, and I cannot answer all of those. I would like to invite you to come and sit down with me over a cup of tea and some chops in Calcutta and spend 3 hours, and then we'll have just started talking about this. Let me give you a couple of quick feedback. One is, the word mother itself is not that simple. It's about what stands behind that signifier, right? It's not just our mother or femininity. There are different ways of thinking about that. It's fecundity, it is sexual prowess, all sorts of. Ganga is a very fickle deity, has all sorts of manifestations. She sits on the right thigh of Pratipa, if you don't remember the Mahabharata, and says, no, I can't, I'm old, Shantanu will marry, says all that. So it's a complex imagery, right? I think the mother simplifies it. We'll shelve that for now. The Uttarakhand story is fascinating because, the Uttarakhand Dam was proposed when I was in school, studying River Valley Project. And the Koteshwar Dam was just finished like a couple of years ago, right? Why did it take that long? Like much of my lifetime. Protest. Not necessarily concerted or over and over again, right? Sundarlal Bahuguna's protest, Uttarakhand, Bahuguna's fasts, Indira Gandhi's response to it, right? If you keep building those kinds of dams for short-term purpose of electricity in places that are susceptible to what are called tear faults, people will die. Maybe you can give people a choice. You will have electricity, you'll be able to watch cricket and television in your house, but you will die someday. Maybe not you, but someone else. How do you ask that question, right? You can't go to a village and say, sorry, guys, too late, you can't have electricity. Obviously not. The point about the Anthropocene, which you rightfully pointed out, what is the point about the Anthropocene? Forget about the geological stratigraphy, just the idea. The sheer weight and anonymous weight of human presence on this planet is not sustainable. We know that. But it's such an imponderable question that we want to shelve it. We are basically in a state of deep procrastination, right? Me, myself included. One day something will happen, or it's too late, something like that. None of this is feasible. The point is that how do we get from that sort of state to a situation in which you tackle smaller problems without necessarily exploiting everything you do for other purposes, political, ideological, and other things. I mean, that's the thing. And I think that I'm not an engineer, I'm not a water scientist, I'm not a geologist, I'm just your simple history teacher, okay? What I'm suggesting is that please, when you think about the river, think about all that goes with it. People, livelihoods, safety, all of that. That's all I can do. And I can say that people worked this out in the past, right? Just one quick thing about Bhagirath that I wanted to tell you. Bhagirath was a man, not a god. Do you know why Bhagirath, why that family, Raja Shagor, Sagara, you know why that family was afflicted to begin with? Because the word Sagara is one who is born with Garala, with poison. And the poison had entered that family a long time ago. And the actions of the Sagara sons, the 10,000 sons, etc., was already manifestation, or already something. The epics are brilliant, you know. They're saying that sin was inevitable, and so was tapasya. And you know why Bhagirath succeeded when Anshuman didn't? Because Dilipa, his father, was impotent, and he could not produce children. Bhagiratha was born out of the desire of two queens. And because he was born without semen, he had no bones. And you know how he got his bones? Because of Ashtavakra Muni, who saw him, thought he was imitating him. And said, no, he was born. And Muni's blessing gave him bones. Bhagiratha is a perfect non-sexual agent to bring down the celestial goddess, right? I mean, that's one manifestation. There are many other myths. I've explored them in a chapter called the Ganga Descent. There are many contradictory myths sometimes. But this idea of human fallibility is deeply embedded in the Puranas, is deeply embedded in every literature. And human fallibility is staring us in the face. But I don't want to bring, ecological disasters onto the exact same page as mythological ideas of sin. That would be a disservice to history and mythology. Please, sir.
I'd just like to mention that I am an engineer, and in fact I studied in Banaras only. And we had a professor, you might have interacted with him, Professor Veerbhadra Mishra.
I have met him actually. I
I'm
spent
sure
time
you
with
would
him.
have,
Yes.
He was the Mahant of Sankat Mochan
Absolutely.
Mandir also, but he was also a professor of civil engineering and hydraulics in our institute. And
He gave a wonderful talk on shallow pools and algae when he came to Syracuse University when I was teaching there.
Okay.
Yes.
A very learned man.
Yes.
And took up the cause of cleaning the Ganga in Varanasi, set up the Swachh Ganga Abhiyan. And as you pointed out, that just as carcasses, etc., are floating around, the main sewer line of Ganga, of the city, comes out near the Dashashwamedh Ghat,
Yes.
where every morning for piety people go and bathe. So he would try to explain to them, at least clean the Ganga before you go into it. But unfortunately, I think maybe because of this mindset that, oh, that's not my problem, I'll
Yeah.
bathe and I'll go. So he died a disillusioned man.
Do you know, sir, when he passed away?
Uh, Maybe about 4 years back,
Oh, I
3 or
see.
4 years back. I think it's around that time. I'm
Okay.
not exactly sure, but it's around that time. Not very long back. So, in its wisdom, the government has tried to, of course, the technical cleansing process continues, but they're trying to use the cultural aspects
Yes.
to influence people to keep the Ganga clean. So that is the background. I think I sent this to you, this inception report to you. That is the background of this documentation which
No,
we
yes.
are
I think it's a
attempting.
very important beginning.
So I just thought I'd mention
Yes,
it.
absolutely. Yeah. Faisal, do you want to? Yes, please, sir.
One of the important issue is the pollution of Ganga. It is not through mythology, it has to be through scientific way with people's participation. Crores of rupees have spent, but my question is, have you studied exactly what is happening now? I understand ISRO is monitoring, that is not on site, it is through remote. And what is the result of that? Any idea on that?
Um, I think that I would be, I would hesitate to pronounce judgment on and a multi-million-dollar projects like the Ganga Action Plan, which had to be abandoned. You know, why do such things don't work? Have not worked in the past. It's something that, you know, as a historian, I would be, hesitant to give one kind of an answer. All I can say is that this is the kind of work that was done by the sociologist Jim Scott, and others have written about it. It's like it is a question of scale. You know, if you want to solve everything together in a large scale, top down process, then it becomes its own bureaucratic nightmare. It's not. I'm without blaming, people's intentions or resources. I think that if you ask me, and this is, I'm not talking as an expert. I'm talking about a layman, as a commoner, someone who just has written a history of the river. All I can say is that we need both. We need both the large scale issues of financing and regulation and laws, but we also need the small scale bottom up issues of fishermen, people who handle the cremations, and we have to bring people together from the top and the bottom. Otherwise, look what happened when the Uttarakhand decision came down. Second article of the Indian Constitution, right? This law that the Ganga, is actually an environmentally, is a human rights issue. The Supreme Court had to intervene and say, no, you cannot actually implement that, operationalize that law, because then everybody would sue, right? Like, I'm sorry, I'll sue you. The river is polluted. How do you deal with that? It's just, it's the scale of it and the complexity of it is too much. So I am, and I'll just say this, and maybe Faisal, you can add to this. You study modern polities more than I do. It seems that I'm very suspicious of all-encompassing, mega multi-million-dollar projects that promise to alleviate human misery of that scale. We should know this. I think of Kopileshwar Bhattacharya and his stand against the Damodar Valley project, saying that, look, already we know that the Tennessee Valley project didn't work or had tremendous consequences that are, but DVC went on with great gusto, and maybe you can say today we are judging it by hindsight. But the promise of electricity, the promise of, I mean, what did we do in school from class 5 onwards? Like, regurgitated exams year after year, multi-purpose river valley project. It was my school final in geography. I had a huge chart. I could tell you all about, heights and Cusack and Hirakud, Bhakranangal, we all did that, right? Think about the ideology that was implanted in my head as a 5-year-old that done rightly, India will become a modern nation state and join the ranks of the advanced states of the world. We will build dams like the Great Grand Coulee Dam. We'll build dams like the Shasta Dam. We'll tame the rivers and we'll stop our dependence on the monsoons. Are you kidding me? Have we stopped our dependence on the monsoons right now? With all our technology and meteorological, just ask the average person right, 30 miles from now waiting for the rains because the crop is getting delayed. There are certain basic realities, which the promise of development cannot, address without nuance, without understanding, and without a sense of its own limitations. Faisal, did you want to say something?
Just to add, oh, that's fine.
May I add something?
Yes, of course. I just want to finish this up and then, um, this is a debate that has been happening for decades.
Of course.
And it's now tilting. And, I teach modern Indian history and, we go over Nehruvian development, 5-year plans, planning in general, Green Revolution, all of these things, which were undeniably transformative.